Behind the Scene with David Bedein, April 2024. Today we have a special guest, Kenneth Timmerman, who is an expert on what's happening in Iran. That may have been thought of as a crazy subject that no one would want to talk about, but this week we had the unprecedented situation of an attack of Iran on Israel, on Israeli territory. Not just one attack, but 331 attacks. And I'd like to ask Ken Timmerman, who has specialized in this subject for years, to explain to us what's really going on and what the involvement of the American government was with this attack. Ken, you're on. Tell us how you analyze this situation, please.
Well, David, thanks for having me here with you. It's really a pleasure and an honor. We've known each other for many, many years, and I have a great deal of respect for what you and your center have been doing. I've been tracking the Iranian regime for well over 40 years. I first got to meet dissidents from Iran coming through Paris in the early 1980s, and many of them have subsequently been assassinated. I have always believed that the regime will fight Israel to the blood of the last Palestinian. This regime in Tehran will fight Israel to the blood of the last Lebanese or Iraqi, but they don't want to sacrifice very many Iranians, and they have always tried to avoid a direct, kinetic military confrontation with the state of Israel. Why? Because they fear the state of Israel. For some reason, I'm going to get into why I think that happened, but for some reason they overcame that fear on April 14th. I, in fact, believed that they would not retaliate for the striking of the consulate in Damascus, which was not a consulate, but it was a war headquarters where Brigadier General Mohammad Reza Zahedi was plotting new attacks on Israel with his top commanders. So it was like a Ministry of Defense building. It was a combat command headquarters. But I didn't think they'd respond because, to my thinking, and I think the way that the Iranians have believed before, if they directly attacked Israel from the Iranian heartland, that would have given a green light to Israel to do what Prime Minister Netanyahu, we're told, has wanted to do for many years, which is to strike Iran directly, and especially to hit nuclear targets. And that's something that they fear. So why and how did they overcome their fear? Well, we finally learned that Joe Biden, the administration, has had back-channel discussions with the Iranians. Most of those have gone through Turkey. The foreign minister of Turkey, Hakan Fidan, he's the former intelligence minister. He is very, very close to Iranian intelligence. He's worked with them for over 20 years. He has been actually part of Iranian terrorist networks, sheltering Iranian terrorist networks that were killing secular Turkish intellectuals in the 1990s. So this guy's been around for a long time, and he's got a bad track record. He's very close to Iran, but that was great for Joe Biden. He was the perfect person to pass a message. They also passed messages, we're told, through the Swiss embassy. Now, here's what Biden is reported, according to Reuters, to have told the Iranians. Biden said, it's okay to attack Israel as long as your attack is, quote, within certain limits. And apparently those limits meant no direct targeting of civilian infrastructure. We don't know whether they did target civilian infrastructure because Israel and Israel's allies managed to shoot down all 170 drones and the 30-some cruise missiles before they ever entered Israeli airspace. We do know that some of the ballistic missiles hit near Nevatim Air Base, where the F-35s of the Israeli Air Force are located. But those are the only missiles that actually struck Israeli territory, as far as I am aware. Biden then was hoping it would be over. Israel attacks the Iranian consulate in Damascus. Iran launches a foiled counterattack against Israel. End of story. But Biden is living in some comic strip world. He's living in a video game world. You cannot be sitting in Israel, and David, you know this far, far better than I do. You cannot be sitting in Israel in the middle of the night with air raid sirens going off all across the country and just think it's a video game. Israel was under attack, and it was under attack by a genocidal power That is, frankly, something that is totally unacceptable. And I hope that the Israeli leadership will not allow themselves to be constrained by the United States under the excuse that, oh, well, we protected you on April 14th. We helped take down those drones and those cruise missiles, and we gave you targeting information. So we don't want you to counterattack. We don't want this war to escalate. We are going to restrain you from further action. I hope that the Prime Minister and the War Cabinet, and I hope that the opposition leaders as well, will join together and reject that kind of American restraint.
See, what I don't understand in this equation, and maybe you can explain it to me because I have a very, I don't have a thick skin, but I'm thinking logically. They're saying that they're not going to attack civilian targets, but the entire community of Israel, all 10 million people who live in Israel were attacked. And speaking as a grandfather now, with 12 grandchildren who were traumatized for life from this, they will never forget this. It has more of a trauma for them than what happened on October 7th last year, because this affected everyone. And as far as they're concerned, my grandchildren are concerned, there are missiles in the sky about to hit them. So how can he say that he's avoiding civilian targets when the entire civilian life in Israel has been disrupted?
Well, David, obviously, you are 100% right. You're 100% right. That's why I said Biden seems to be treating this like a video game where humans are not involved. I listened on April 14th to Norman Rule, who is a former CIA officer. He was the national intelligence officer for Iran for a number of years before Biden came into office. And he was asked on CNN, well, what about Iran not attacking civilian targets? And he said, all Iran ever does is to attack civilian targets. That's what they've done. All of the rockets from Hezbollah have attacked civilian targets. All of the rockets from Hamas have attacked civilian targets. And as you just said so eloquently, all of those incoming missiles on April 15th were targeting the entire civilian population of Israel.
All right. Now, why? Okay, you asked a question, which is what we asked on Passover. Why is this night different from all other nights? What happened? Why is this different from all other nights, and why did this suddenly happen? Because what I always said to people was, well, Iran, although they don't get along with Israel, unlike the League of Arab Nations, it's not in a state of war with Israel. I always pointed that out, and now perhaps I'm wrong.
Iran is now in a state of war with Israel. They've directly attacked Israel. I mean, there's no equivocation. There's no other way that you can describe what happened.
So what changed, Kenneth? What changed here?
Well, I think what changed was this green light from President Biden, which is, I'm trying to find an appropriate, polite way of describing it, but it's just an unbelievable shift in policy. I cannot understand a United States president giving a green light to a murderous regime such as the one in Tehran to attack Israel. It just makes no sense whatsoever.
Kenneth, you qualify as a journalist, and therefore you ask questions. What response did you get to this theory that you have from the American government or from the White House, the State Department, the Defense Department? Did you get a response to your theory, which, in terms of what just happened, that Biden gave a green light?
Well, this is now, I would say, no longer a theory. It's been reported by Reuters. It's been reported by other news agencies. The White House itself has acknowledged that they had discussions with through the Swiss government, where they were passing messages to Tehran of messages of, quote, restraint, not messages don't do it, but messages of restraint. So it has been confirmed officially by the U.S. government that there were discussions between the Biden White House and the Iranian regime before April 14th.
Can someone define for me what restraint means in this context?
David, no, you can't. Look, this White House, remember President Biden in February of 2022, when the CIA was telling him Russia was about to invade Ukraine. And he went on television and he said, well, if they just carry out a minor incursion that'll be okay. We're not going to react if there's a minor incursion. And of course, we all know what happened. The rest is history.
This
So,
sounds like
so I
someone's
think
being half pregnant. Is this what like being half pregnant?
it's like being half pregnant, David. It's a good analogy. But unfortunately, this is Joe Biden. Remember, this is the man that Robert Gates, former CIA director, former defense secretary under Obama, who he wrote in his memoir after leaving government. He said he's known Joe Biden for 40 years. Biden has been at the pinnacle of the U.S. foreign policy establishment for 40 years, and he has never made an intelligent decision in his life. He's not been
Now,
right on anything.
how do the people who are close to Biden and who support him are not we won't call them people who are obsequious to Biden, but how do the people around Biden who work with him, how do they respond to all this?
Well, I remember who's the national security advisor? A guy named Jake Sullivan. Jake Sullivan worked for Hillary Clinton in the Obama administration. He was arguably one of the key decision makers during the Benghazi debacle on September 11th, 2012, when Iranian-backed jihadi terrorists attacked the U.S. consulate in Benghazi, Libya, and killed 4 Americans. These are people who, frankly, do not understand power politics. They do not understand geopolitics. They do not understand nation states. They don't understand the motivations of other leaders. And they somehow think that all foreign policy can be decided at the White House in terms of voters in Dearborn, Michigan, who are anti-Israel, who are genocidal themselves, calling for the genocide and the murder of Jews. It's David. It's hard to understand. Let me just put it that way. It is hard to understand.
Now, is the Arab world? We know about the reports that there were Arab states that helped in this attack. How is the Arab world reacting to this? And talking specifically about Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Egypt, Jordan.
Jordan and Saudi Arabia took part in the defense of Israel on April 14th. Qatar has been, as you know very well, has been the host of Hamas leaders. Egypt is playing a difficult, straddling the fence role. They don't want Hamas to leave Gaza and come into Egypt, but they also want to be providing some kind of aid to Palestinian civilians. The Egyptians were on the wrong side, if you wish, or just, I should say, the far side of the April 14th attacks and did not join the defense, as far as I'm aware.
Fascinating. Now, where does this lead us now? I mean, there is a certain. I've been in Israel for 53 years. I've never seen a shock in Israel like we have right now, and people not understanding what's going on. What is the next step? By the way, for the listeners and viewers of this program, Ken's excellent analysis of the Biden regime is on our website. It's a leading item on IsraelBehindTheNews.com. No fee to get on it. Push a button, you'll see it. It's right there, and you'll see basically more analysis of the kind we've just heard from Ken. So this leads me again to try to understand will there be a reaction in the Arab world to the support that Saudi Arabia and Qatar have given to these attacks? I mean, they are still bound by their loyalty to the Arab League, which is in a state of war with Israel since 1945. So, will there be a counteraction or a counter response? Do you feel?
I don't think so, David. I think the Abraham Accords negotiated by President Trump, which brought the UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, Morocco into peace agreements with Israel. I think it's kind of like a virus. Once you catch it, it's spreading. And other Arab nations are catching that virus. It's called prosperity. It's called peace. It's called not just coexistence. It is called peace and prosperity. And I think that's what most of the Arab states are seeking. They know that Iran is seeking to control the region. Iran, I've got a piece that's coming out probably in another month or so with the America First Policy Institute about Iran and what to do about the Islamic regime in Tehran. And one of the extraordinary developments of the past 3 years since Biden has been president has been the creation of what I would call a China, Russia, Iran axis of opportunity. And these three powers are now coordinating to dominate the flow of oil and natural gas from the Persian Gulf region to the rest of the world. 20% of the world's oil transits the Strait of Hormuz every day. That is a well-known fact. The Iranian regime has repeatedly threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz to, quote, punish the Western world and to raise oil prices. But what people are less aware of is that Russia, Iran, and Qatar together, just those three states, control 60% of the world's natural gas supplies. And if you have those three states banding together to control prices and supply, you could have a severe crisis in the future with the price of natural gas. And I think that's where we're headed. The Israeli government has a very tough decision to make, and I know some of the things that they're going to be looking at. They're going to be looking at how they can inflict maximum damage in ways that will have minimum blowback on Israel. And I think they are also looking to be able to be righteous in the eyes of the world in the targets that they have selected. I think they also understand that the Iranian people are actually supportive of Israeli strikes on, for example, the Revolutionary Guards. If Israel
how is that
out,
expressing itself, Tien? How does that express itself? This, what you're alluding to, a grassroots support for the Israel position against Iran. How is that expressing itself?
You see this a lot of times in demonstrations, anti-regime demonstrations, where people wave signs saying that they don't want to be supporting Hezbollah. They don't give a rat's behind for Hamas. They want the regime to, their government to be responsive to the people. I mean, there's all kinds of things that you see at these protests, David, that support it. And you hear Iranians on television, you hear them on radio, you hear people on call-in shows saying exactly this. They would welcome strikes. And I have heard it actually from family members of regime personnel, senior people in the regime. They would welcome an Israeli strike that takes out the Revolutionary Guards, or that severely disables or diminishes the authority of the Revolutionary Guards. Why? Because the Rev Guards are ultimately the ones who repress the Iranian people.
Now let's go on to something also pressing: Iranian nuclear development. Now, the Prime Minister of Israel, the current Prime Minister of Israel, and as long as he's Prime Minister, has made it part of his policy to do what he can to forcibly stop the Iranian nuclear development. Where do you think that's going?
Well, and Israel has taken many steps to do that. Most of them have been non-kinetic. In other words, they haven't used F-35s or missiles or anything else. They've used subversion. They've used intelligence, carried out the most extraordinary intelligence coup in the history of modern day intelligence, I think, getting the Iran nuclear archive out of Tehran in the middle of the night. There are targets that they could eventually hit, and those would become legitimate targets. What Israel's government is going to be weighing is whether that would then get the Iranians to unleash a weapon that they have not yet shown on the battlefield against Israel's strategic assets. And do they want to engage in that kind of war? Another issue which you did not directly write about today, which is on our site, IsraelBehindTheNews.com, is the issue of the threat against Jews around the world. Right. Now we know about the PLO, also known as the PA, also known as Hamas, whatever, what they're doing in terms of incitement against Jews. What about Iranians? Are the Iranians also involved in international incitement against Jews, and how lethal is it? Well, there have been some reports, and not confirmed yet, I'm actually looking into this, that the Iranian regime may have played a role in financing or organizing some of these demonstrations in the United States calling for attacks on Israel, burning the American flag, death to Israel, death to America, in closing down the Golden Gate Bridge, closing down the Brooklyn Bridge in New York. So that is something that is possible. But look, let me not be reassuring here, David. The Iranian regime, when they want to kill Jews around the world, they do so. They do not feel any constraint in doing that. They hit the Israeli embassy and then the AMIA headquarters in Buenos Aires back in the 90s. Mossad has foiled several plots to kill Israeli tourists in Bulgaria, Cyprus, and elsewhere. And there have been many. The regime likes to organize conferences, for example, and invite people like me to those conferences and then either kidnap them or attack them. I was invited to one that was supposed to take place at the end of this month in the south of Spain, and in the end I refused, and the organizer said it's a good thing you did because I was not very convinced that we had good security.
Well, that's good. And then you couldn't appear on programs like this. Look, Ken, I must ask also, I sent you a piece of information that the member of Knesset, Israel's Knesset parliament, who cast the deciding vote in favor of what was called the Oslo peace process, was actually an Iranian spy. And he's sitting for life in prison in Israel. His name is Dr. Gonen Segev. To what extent, again, I asked you a few days ago if you looked into it or what your theory would be, to what extent does Iran have sleepers in Israel who might continue Gonen Segev's precedent? Is there a swelling underground of people like this? Is this just a sore thumb?
It's a very good question. My guess would be that there are others like him. And the reason I say that is that the Iranian regime learned intelligence from the KGB in the 1980s. So they understand what it is to place sleeper agents in the United States, in Western countries, in Israel, and activate them later on. They understand how to use those sleeper agents to then promote other sleeper agents. So this is a KGB tactic. The Iranian regime, their intelligence establishment understands that. The second thing, very important to understand, is they have, through the Foreign Ministry and the Ministry of Security and Intelligence and Security, MOIS, they have what they call the Iran Experts Initiative, which is to place quote unquote academic experts in think tanks and in government. We now know, for example, that the 2015 nuclear deal was actually written in Tehran and then conveyed to some of these Iran initiative, expert initiative people in the U.S. negotiating team. Absolutely extraordinary, the penetration that they have had of at least the U.S. government. And as you say, also the Israeli Knesset.
Now, let me ask you another news item which didn't surprise me, but I was surprised it was on the front page of the New York Times on April 11th, that Iran is actually flooding Judea and Samaria with arms, weapons, ammunition, missiles, which are in Palestinian hands now. Any comment?
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that the Iranians are doing this. They seem to pay no price for that whatsoever. I would certainly chalk that up to, again, part of Iran's ongoing war against Israel. And I would hope that Israel's leaders would take that into the equation, put that into the balance when they're deciding how to strike back at the Islamic regime in Tehran.
Is it a war against Israel or a war against the Jews from the point of view of Iran?
It's a war against Israel. It's a war against the Jewish state of Israel. It's not yet a war against Jews worldwide. There are still some Jews left in Iran, not very many. But look, anti-Semitism, as you and I know, is one of the guiding tenets of Islam, of Quranic doctrine, and it has been used by every group, whether it's Hamas, whether it's Islamic Jihad or Hezbollah, as the backbone of their ideology. The Jews are sons of monkeys and pigs, as The Quran says, therefore, it is our duty to exterminate them. This is an ugly, ugly doctrine. It goes very deep. And David, you have done such terrific work exposing how this has gone through the school books. I talk about this all the time when I can on Sky News Arabia and give you credit for what you're doing. The de-radicalization is the single most important thing that could happen in Judea and in the West Bank part of Judea and Samaria and Gaza.
Do you make a comparison of de-radicalization with denazification?
I haven't said that openly. I don't think it's necessary to say that. It's de-Bazification, denazification. Look, when you're teaching your children to genocidal views, when you're teaching them to murder people because they are Jewish or because they are Israeli or either one or both, that is something that just does not fit in. There is no peace process when one side is doing that, and there's no peace partner.
Well, may I quote you in my future talks? I'll be happy to. Anyway, I want to thank you for appearing on our show. This is not going to be the last. I'm threatening you. This is not going to be the last time that we're going to ask you to appear. The wonders of technology make it much easier for me to sit at my desk in Jerusalem and talk to you wherever you are. And it's just marvelous to have this kind of technology. And I thank my colleague Lawrence for facilitating this connection. And following this discussion, we're going to play one of our movies called Iran: Billions for Terror, where we interview young Palestinian Arabs about the whole connection with Iran, and we show some of the missiles that have landed. One of the things that amazes me to this day is the extent to which people do not know that this is happening. And as we've discussed on this program, on September 27, 10 days or 14 days before the invasion on October 7, I took all of our intelligence experts to meet with the official intelligence people in Israel to warn that if they didn't take the guns out of the UNRWA camps, there would be a disaster. Well, it's no solace to be correct about something, but that's the issue. This is what's happening. We made these movies over a period of 15 years. They're on our website, IsraelBehindTheNews.com, and I'm not embarrassed to say that we work privately. We only get private support, and people who see this program, you'll see on our website, IsraelBehindTheNews.com, how people can help us and also invite us to make presentations, if not in person, then at least on Skype, and when people come to Israel. We have an office that's centrally located. We look forward to meeting people and interfacing. But one of the great books of sources of theology that I rely on, I was looking for my copy of Mad Magazine, but Mad Magazine, which I grew up with, their theme was "You can't make these things up." So that's my as a religious Jew, I don't want to say that Mad Magazine is more important to me than the Talmud or the Bible. But I must say that kind of insight is what I grew up with, and you can't make these things up. Neither of us expected the Iranians to actually launch a missile attack on Israel. But the other night, 1:45 a.m., when we were all woken up, and I'll just summarize a quote: a general in Israel named Uzi Dayan, Moshe Dayan's nephew. One of the announcers said, "Good evening." He says, "You mean the evening of the war?" In other words, not just the evening of the new war. So it's no longer they try to make it easy by saying, "Oh, there's a conflict and all that." I know there's a conflict. There was a conflict when I played in West Side Story when I was in 12th grade. But this is not a conflict. This is a war, and the rules of war apply now. So all I can say is thank you, Ken, for appearing. Ken Timmerman, a fine scholar, and thanks to the wonders of internet, you can see his material, which has been posted. You can see the books that he's written, and he's been a great Shabbat guest at my house, and we introduced him to the concept of wine on Friday night, which he seems to like. And it's okay when you're both Catholic and attending a Sabbath meal, you can have the best of both worlds. Anyway, thank you very much. And Lawrence, who is my host here, I'm sending you the link Iran, Billions for Terror, a movie we made a few years ago, and now it's relevant. Because until recently, people were doubting my, my integrity. Maybe what David is saying is not correct. But I always finish with a great joke I heard when I was a kid. What's the difference between a crackpot and a genius? Well, a genius is a step ahead of his time. A crackpot is 2 steps ahead of his time. So you'll decide which I am, David Bedein. Behind the scene with David Bedein. Thank you for coming and wishing everyone, people who are keeping the Passover holiday, a happy and kosher Passover. And we say, Ela shebechol dor v'dor omdim aleinu l'chalotenu. In every generation, there's a people who come up against us, but God takes care of those people, in a sense, and the way it's written, with their own hands. So we'll see. Stay tuned for more unexpected things in the Middle East, and with people like Ken Timmerman, whose mind works an extra 24 hours a day. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be able to welcome you to this program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. And as the psalmist says in Psalm 91, and with my eyes only, I watch the punishment of the wicked.
There you go. And that's front page news. And I think I'm a little older than you, and I watched the Eichmann trial when I was 10 years old, and it had a sequel to it, which is, the hanging of Eichmann. And that was something to see and to understand. And again, we saw justice there. And it means that there's been no more airplanes between Israel and Argentina, but that's another story. Thank you very much. Good evening, and stay in touch. Our website continues, IsraelBehindTheNews.com. Been operating since 1997. And again, from Mad Magazine, you can't make these things up. Good night.
Good night. Good night. God bless. Thank you, David.
For years, negotiations have been ongoing with Iran to limit its military power. They have now come to a head in Washington. Few people, however, have discussed what will happen if the billions in frozen Iranian assets are actually released to Tehran. For decades, Iran has been a source of funding and weapons for Hezbollah and Hamas. Hezbollah has been responsible for the deaths of hundreds of Americans in Lebanon, and is believed to have blown up Jewish buildings in Argentina. Those bombings in Argentina killed over 100 people. Argentina's former top prosecutor, who was recently murdered, accused Hezbollah of operating in more than 10 countries as an Iranian proxy. The other proxy of Iran is Hamas. The flow of arms and funds from Iran to Gaza has helped create a network of tunnels and a well-stocked arsenal of rockets, drones, and other deadly weapons. In Iran, leaders have been steadfast in their support for Hamas and continue to vow to arm the Palestinians.
و به خصوص دنیای اسلام موظفند هر چه میتوانند به تجهیز ملت فلسطین کمک کنند.
With the promise of billions in cash and weapons, Hamas continues to prepare for its next war. This past summer, we visited the Gaza Strip, where Hamas held military training camps for 15,000 boys and girls. These children are students in schools run by UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency. At the UNRWA schools, the kids are taught that they have the right of return by force of arms to villages that their families left in 1948. This summer's military camp was a mix of nationalism, radical Islam, and brainwashing, convincing the kids to become child soldiers. The campers and counselors were eager to express their yearning for jihad and martyrdom.
في سبيل الله نمضي في سبيل الله نمضي في سبيل الله نمضي في سبيل الله نمضي. في قطاع غزة يوجد أكثر من 50 مخيم، العدد اللي التحق فيه أكثر من 15,000 فارس من فرسان حماس. في البداية احنا بدينا في المحاضرات الأخلاقية التعبئة والتوجيه كانت عن القرآن الكريم، ثم أخلاق الشاب المسلم، ثم بدأت بالتدريبات العسكرية وفتح الميدان وتدريبات اللياقة والمشاة العسكرية، ثم تلاها تدريبات على السلاح وفن التعامل مع السلاح. كسرنا حاجز الخوف عند هؤلاء الفتية أو الشباب في مقتبل عمرهم. الشباب استطاعوا اقتحام النيران، تفجير. في الأمس كان هناك تفجير المغتصبات الصهيونية، كانت هناك أجسام، وتعلموا فن استعمال المتفجرات وتفجيرها.
عن طريق خطف الجنود نعمل عمليات استشهادية والمقاومة.
نقول لهم انتظرونا بني صهيون، فسوف نجز رقابكم، وسوف ندمر بيوتكم ونحرق بيوتكم فوق رؤوسكم ونهدمها فوقكم، وإنا قادمون.
نقول لهم والله لنأتينهم عن قريب وسنقطع رقابهم بإذن الله.
إحنا في غزة عايشين فقط للجهاد والمقاومة، يعني ما لنا في حياتنا إلا الجهاد والمقاومة وعبادة الله سبحانه وتعالى.
حق العودة مقدس مهما طال الوقت، لكن سيعود، والدولة الإسرائيلية دولة زائلة زائفة. مهما طال الوقت فستزول، ولن نعترف نحن أيضا نحن لن نعترف بإسرائيل إطلاقا. طبعا أنا انضميت لمخيم فرسان حماس حبا في استرجاع الوطن الفلسطيني، وحبا في الموت في سبيل الله. الصواريخ هي حلنا الوحيد لاسترجاع الوطن. طبعا لا أرضى إطلاقا أن هذا التقسيم يمس بأوضاع المسلمين في فلسطين، وهذا يعتبر تدنيس للمسجد الأقصى.
احنا نتمنى انه يوم من الايام نقدر نطلعهم كلهم من القدس وندوس على رقابهم وعلى رؤوسهم، لانه هم جنسوا دياناتنا وجنسوا اماكن مقدسه عنا.
ايوه داوم زحف، يلا اسرع من هيك.
أن أتعلم الرجولة وأرجع أراضينا المحتلة وأحرر الأسرى من بين الاحتلال.
تعلمت أن أدافع عن أرضي، وجيت هنا عشان أحرر الأقصى، عشان القدس معروفة للعرب مش لليهود. أنا أرض وقف إسلامي، ما ينفعش ولا واحد يفرط فيها.
القدس بس للمسلمين، للعرب والمسلمين بس، واليهود ما لهمش شيء في القدس.
بإذن الله سنحررها بدمائنا وبدماء شهدائنا بإذن الله تعالى، بالاستشهاد والعمليات الاستشهادية بإذن الله.
This year, for the first time, Hamas recruited young girls to its military camps. Here, Hamas Prime Minister Ismail Haniyeh congratulates the girls at a camp banquet.
وما هذه المخيمات التي نحن بصدد الاحتفاء بها الآن إلا الامتداد لهذه الجهود المباركة ولهذا العمل المتواصل في مشروع التحرير والعودة إلى القدس والأقصى.
Listen to their counselors talk about their aspirations to become warriors.
فنحن هذه القدس لنا، هي عاصمتنا ليس لليهود. هم يزعمون أن لهم الهيكل المزعوم، هو ليس لهم، هو هيكل سليمان ليس لهم. القدس لنا نحن فقط، للمسلمين فقط. هؤلاء اليهود الخنازير ليس لهم لا قدس ولا معالم في المسجد الأقصى، هم لهم فقط بيوت الخنازير وليس لهم في الأقصى.
القدس لا تسترد إلا بالسلاح وبسلاح المقاومة، ورسالتي إلى المقاومة أوجهها أن امسكوا، ارفعوا سلاحكم في وجه المحتل، أن اتحدوا في وجه المحتل حتى تحرير القدس وكامل فلسطين إن شاء الله.
The girls performed a war dance for the Prime Minister. At the boys' camps, the children were trained for combat and guerrilla warfare. Iranian funding for Hamas and Hezbollah serves as a lifeline for their goal, war against Israel. Billions in new Iranian funds will guarantee a new generation of motivated and trained killers. Is that what the world needs today?